Welcome back to Race to Win, the sailing podcast. The entire point of sailboat racing is to push the limits and to get better every time. Well, this is really fun. Occasionally, there can be some unfortunate consequences. If you haven't run aground while racing yet, believe me, you will. You're looking at the Jazz Cup, which is a classic race in San Francisco Bay. 26 miles. It's usually downwind here from San Francisco over to Benicia. Let's take a look at the big picture here, roughly halfway through the race. You have boats, again, starting in San Francisco, trying to get around here to Benicia. But you have a massive, massive ebb current, a couple of knots going against these guys. So right now they're hiding behind Point St. Pablo and then in Richmond here. And as they get around it, there actually is sort of a back eddy bouncing off of the point. So the idea is hide behind the point and then get around it and maybe get into this countercurrent eddy. The problem is that also over here it is very shallow. So it got a little bit tricky that day for some of these boats. Let's take a look at what happens to these guys. They're all kind of bunched together trying to get around the point here. And as they start going, boom, Centro Miglia aground. Oh no. Shameless. Stopped as well. Libra manages to sneak by just, oh my gosh, sweating bullets, literally. They draw a lot less than either of those two boats. And then here you can see Clean Sweep, Goose. They were right there with Libra, but they went wide at the point. So this was one of those races where it was really important to be able to get inside of the current and not have to go out against all that hard stuff. I'll tell you what it is about running aground. Nobody wants to talk about it. They will pretend it didn't happen. My own father won't even talk to me on my podcast about his recent grounding. So I have to really give a big hand to Will Paxton. Will was sailing on Centro Miglia and is the only person that agreed to talk to me on the record about this day. Keep in mind, we're not recording the entire fleet here, and quite a few boats ran aground that day. Wouldn't you say, Will?
There was many that ran aground in that race.
Right? I think a few of them might have kept those tracks private for this one. But anyways, obviously you never want to run aground, but if you do, you want to be able to get out of there quick and recover. So thank you so much, Will. You're awesome. Sorry that I found your hidden track for this race and I'm making you talk about it. So anyways, what happened?
It's completely my fault for running aground. And I just want to emphasize the fact that, whenever you're doing a race like that, make sure you're sailing on a boat where you trust the instruments. To the point where, if you're getting on a strange boat and you're in charge of the navigation, get a spinnaker sheet and a winch handle and, test the depth sounder. Is it from the bottom? Is it from the surface? Is it from the bottom of the keel? Owner doesn't quite remember. Who knows? You make sure that you know that instrument is giving you valid data. Super important.
And not to call you out, Will, and thanks again so much for talking to me, but wouldn't you say that you have local knowledge of this particular area?
I do. And in that particular race, I ran aground on a spot where I've laughed at people running aground for being silly there a ton of times. And the funny thing is in that race, it was really light air, so we got closer in there than I've ever been before.
Why would light air make you do that?
Just because usually it's so windy, you wouldn't try and cut that close, but in slow motion, it's easier to cut close. Usually running aground in a race is usually a low speed incident, especially if you're sailing in any kind of tidal area.
Right, because if it's windy, that tide disadvantage isn't going to be as big of a deal as when you're going really slow in light air. So I guess it makes you more likely to do something a little bit riskier because the advantage is so much bigger. So talk to me about what happened when you ran aground and, how do you get out of this?
Well, usually what happens in light air is you're heeled to leeward, for starters, which makes it really bad because when you realize that you've run aground, the boat stops, and because you lose all your apparent wind, the boat stands up, and all of a sudden, you went from drawing 6 feet to drawing 7 feet. So now you're really stuck in the mud, and you have no momentum, and you have no apparent wind. So you have to you need to react immediately because it gets worse the longer that you sit there. So first thing that you want to do is hopefully the deeper water is back the way you came. So you want to tack immediately and when you tack, you want to backwind the jib because you want to force the boat around back the way you came on the other tack. So you want to backwind the jib. You want to heel the boat over. You want to put everyone out on the boom. We were the race was almost at a stop at that point. We were in a desperate position to not lose any places. So I actually sent somebody out to sit on out on a spinnaker halyard because you have more leverage from the top of the mast.
Fortunately for us, there was a photographer there from the sailing website Pressure Drop who captured this truly awesome moment of Will's escape.
Well, in this case, it wasn't the heaviest person on the boat, but obviously you want to send the heaviest person possible. Well, she's also the bow girl, so she was quick with the harness and everything and got out there. And as we kept working it harder and harder to tip the boat over and slowly started the boat moving towards deeper water. And she kept yelling to get pulled up because the boat was tipping over increasingly and dipping her in the water, and she had her phone in her pocket, so she kept screaming, "Help! Pick the boat up higher!" So that was pretty funny.
Well, it certainly made some pretty awesome photos. Practically went viral on Facebook the next day. So, okay, you got out of it by basically tipping the boat over. What are some other methods that you've used or that you could recommend to people that really get stuck?
If you're really stuck, the anchor is the only way you're going to get off without somebody towing you off. It's like last resort. So, like I said, I've been in situations where we took the anchor and we tied it to a fender so someone could swim it out without it sinking them, and then untie it, and then winching the boat out, or using or you could attach it to a halyard at the top of the mast. Is another thing that you could do. Again, you're just trying to tip the boat over because everyone's like, oh well, you'll break the mast, but not really. If you think about it, if you wipe out with your spinnaker in 25 knots of breeze and the boat's flogging and all the crew's on the rail and the rig's whipping, that's an awful lot of load on things. So I trust you that the mast can take all the load in the world to tip the boat over on its side in most cases. And also, the anchor is your friend when you're sailing in those shallow waters. And probably if the wind is shedding down, the next step beyond sailing really close to the shore is anchoring. So we always make sure in San Francisco Bay that our anchor is really ready to go. All the coils are always flaked. We actually tie up the chain and the rope with yarn. So, you're like, okay, quick, anchor, we're in the spot, and someone pulls the thing out and it's in a big knot. You're going to go backwards a couple hundred yards before you get the anchor out. So, the anchor is your friend and part of your race equipment. You should always have it ready.
So I know that one of the ways you can help yourself legally get ungrounded, as we'll call it, is by using your sails while you're racing. Do you have any tips for that? I mean, is there a better way to trim it to help that be more effective?
How do you trim it? Well, you just hope that it fills, and you're basically trying to cause a crash, cause a roundup, and cause the boat to tip over. Like I said, it's really difficult to make that happen sometimes because most groundings in races occur in light air where there's not a lot of wind, and it gets exponentially worse when you come to a stop and the boat stands up and the keel digs into the soft mud or sand. So you really want to react quickly. You spin the boat in the tack, you backwind the jib, you get all the crew weight possible to leeward, and you do everything possible to get out of there.
Thank you again so much, Will, for agreeing to talk to us and giving us all those great tips. Also, a big thank you to Pressure Drop for the use of their awesome photos, and to all the other photographers whose pictures I've used. You can source them if you want to learn more. I hope that everyone has a great couple of weeks sailing, and I'll see you next time. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can find more on our website, www.racecues.com/podcast.